morning. I'm Philip Height, the Terry Third Thursday Chair, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Terry Executive Education Center for Terry Third Thursday. Thank you for being here this morning. Terry Third Thursday is a monthly breakfast event held here in the T. It provides networking opportunities and speakers for alumni and students. It takes a lot to organize. We have 8 members of the alumni board, and of course our sponsors who I'd like to recognize. Our corporate sponsor is Synovus. And our media sponsor is Public Broadcasting Atlanta. If you don't have it on your calendar, next month our Terry Third Thursday program is on November 21st. David Cummings and John Birdsong from Atlanta Ventures will be speaking, and they'll be speaking on their new development south of downtown. December, we do not have an event, and then we will resume in January. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Scott Steilen. Scott is the president and CEO of Steilen Company, a luxury resort and private club on the Georgia coast. He manages the resort's operations, including golf, spa, lodging, vacation rentals, and real estate services. Before joining Steilen in 2011, he spent 10 years at Warnick & Company, a hospitality advisory firm, and previously worked at EY's Hospitality Services Group and HVS International. A graduate of Michigan State University's School of Hospitality Business, Scott grew up in the hotel industry and is a strong advocate for both the hospitality field and his local Georgia community. The Terry College of Business is so grateful to Scott for his support of the Steilen Scholars Program. The Steilen Scholars Program provides an annual experiential learning opportunity with notable Terry alumni and supporters, offering insights into Steilen's business operations and helping students develop personal and professional goals. The program includes lectures, discussions, and mentorship focused on the history and success of the resort, professional development, and team building activities such as nature walks and yoga. Scott, on behalf of the Terry College and its students, thank you for your continued support and welcome to Terry Third Thursday.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is early. So if I sound scratchy, it's because it's early. I usually walk around or try and do some other things to kind of move my hands and do whatever. So I'm going to do my best to try and stay put so that Daryl isn't doing this with the camera and everybody gets nauseous when they watch it later. So this is exciting for me. You know, as Philip said, I went to Michigan State. My wife went to Michigan State. And then we moved to Steilen about 13 years ago. And I was, my kids were all going to Michigan State, right? They all were. Until they found the University of Georgia. Now all 3 of them went to the University of Georgia. It wasn't hard for me to understand why they wanted to be there. The first time I went up to the campus, it was utterly impressive. The administration, everything that was going on. It turns out that my wife and I are probably more active with the University of Georgia than we are at our alma mater. 1, because location is easier. 2, because all 3 of our kids went there. But 3, because they do a way better job. The university does a better job of engaging and even people who didn't go to the University of Georgia, parents who didn't go to the University of Georgia. We chaired the Parents Leadership Council, which was a phenomenal organization that does a lot for students at the university. And we got to know a lot of people, and that's how I got to know Ben Harrison. He offered or asked me to come down and talk to it. I get the pleasure of meeting with these incredibly smart and very impressive young ladies that come and are part of the Steilen Scholars Program. And it's really, it's had more of an impact on me than I guess I thought it would. But I'm here, and this is full circle for me because my son Ryan is here in the audience, and I thought about making him pay to come watch his dad speak. And I thought, man, if I had that would be money for me for years at home, right? Hey, did you know that you paid to watch your dad speak or do whatever? But Christine was nice enough to grant him a guest registration, so I guess I'll just have to come up with something a little bit different. So I'm going to talk for a little bit and then make sure I've got some time for questions for everybody to do it. As I like to say to people, there are no questions that are out of bounds. You know, whatever you ask, I'll be as candid as I can to answer. But if I can't answer it, I'll just tell you I can't answer that question. So I guess I'll start with kind of how it started from our perspective. Many of you, I don't have to explain much about Steilen to an audience like this because I think most of you know it. But, you know, Steilen's been around since 1928. It was a family-owned business for over 80 years. Embarked on an incredible expansion program in the mid-2000s. Built and rebuilt just about everything you see on Steilen proper in terms of the resort facilities, the Cloister, the beach club, our spa and fitness building, condominiums around there. And then in 2008, the Lehman Brothers kind of bankruptcy and the recessionary fallout kind of killed the market, and Steilen was scrambling. Tried to find ways to reduce their debt load, tried to find ways to make it, ultimately realized that they weren't going to be able to do that, put the company up for sale, filed for bankruptcy, and then 4 companies bought Steilen out of bankruptcy at the end of 2010. I got involved Philip mentioned I was on the advisory side before, so I got involved doing due diligence for ultimately our owner before the transaction, and then came back in once 4 owners came together. I'll talk about that in a minute, to buy the company, and we kind of managed the transition, and ultimately I decided to stay, and the rest is history. So I want to start with the notion that it's my belief that a company like this always should be owned by a family or a very, very long-term holder of properties, because it's a very capital-intensive business. It has ups and downs, and it requires kind of a longer-term view. So we had 4 owners that came together that were all 25% partners. And they weren't together initially. There were really kind of 2 groups that were bidding in the auction for the company. One group was the Anschutz Company and Starwood Capital. One group was Oak Tree Capital and Avenue Capital. And they were bidding against each other. And after a couple of rounds of bids, you know, each side kind of signaled to the other side that they might be interested in talking about something together. The judge basically said, okay, you got a couple hours to come together, hammer out some kind of an agreement, and, you know, tell us what you think. So they did that. They put together a partnership with 25% interest, no controlling partner. And then they bought the company out of bankruptcy, and we came in to manage the transition. So for 5 years, plus or minus, 5 years, I had 4 billionaire bosses that were all kind of 25% partners and all had unique and dynamic personalities. And that was a fascinating 5 years that I wouldn't recommend to anybody. I mean, it was full of interesting kind of drama and this and that. And as you would expect, early on, it was very, everybody was aligned. Every decision was a unanimous decision. There was really not much discussion. And about 3.5 to 4 years in, you know, you had a couple of the partners who wanted to try to cash out, wanted to sell, didn't want to reinvest back into the company. You had Phil Anschutz, who wanted to keep reinvesting and doubling down and trying to work through it. And you had one of the partners who was kind of brokering the relationship in the middle. And ultimately, it came to a point in 2016 where where Phil Anschutz bought his other three partners out, and now I've only got one billionaire owner that I work for, and it's much more calm and peaceful. But I'll get to that in a minute. So imagine, you can tell from my accent, even though my voice is scratchy, that I'm not from around here, right? I moved here from Chicago 13 years ago. So you're at Steilen, a family-owned business for 80 plus years. I've got team members, and at the time we had, I don't know, about 1,800 member families, all wondering about this Yankee that is going to take over and run, this company, and what's he going to do? What's he like? Who is he? The one thing I learned from the South really quickly is everybody wants to kind of know your business, right? So there were a lot of probing questions that had nothing to do with business, but everything to do with who you are and so on and so forth. And I tried my best to prep my family for that. We went from, in Chicago, we were utterly anonymous, to being down there where most people knew who you were and who your family was. So I told my kids, when you get in trouble, not if, but when you get in trouble, I'm probably going to know before you get home. And that was true, because we had kind of a local police officer who I became friends with, who always just looked to help the kids out and make sure that they didn't really get in a lot of trouble. But he would call me when they got in trouble. So you're here, you're dealing with those dynamics. I'm also looking at a team that went through a process where it was difficult. At the time, as the company was trying to salvage itself, they laid off a ton of people. People weren't sure what was happening from a job perspective. So we had to kind of stabilize and assess what our team was and then how we would approach. And one of the things that I learned early on is that it's really about building credibility and trust, right? Trust isn't something that's bestowed upon you by a title. It's earned as you go and you meet and you talk with your team and even with our members. So the one great thing about Steilen is that anybody that's been there has a memory that they're holding on to of how great an experience that was. So our job was to make sure that we focused on that memory to bring everybody back into the fold. Because the property never kind of dipped in terms of its quality. We still had a great team there. They continued to make investments, and it wasn't, the old Steilen. Steilen didn't look like the old Steilen or anything else. So for us, it was really about how do we fashion a game plan to bring people back. So our strategy was pretty simple. We had to try to win back the folks who had been there before, and we focused on the Southeast. The Southeast was our biggest market. And then we moved our way up the East Coast to reestablish our credibility. So we were there were three constituencies that we had to establish credibility with. One was our team, to make sure they understood kind of the direction we wanted to go and where we wanted to go. In some cases, we had to build a new team and add and integrate folks, that were new with people that were here already. We had to build credibility back with our members because they weren't certain as to what we were going to do and where we were going to go. And then guests. So we did a few unique things to go out there. We kind of went on the road, and we did a lot of grassroots type of road shows. We went to places in Atlanta and Charlotte and other of our southeastern markets to just meet with members and guests in that space to try to tell them a little bit about what was going on. Early on, we went to New York because we wanted to kind of re-engage with the New York market, which is already a bad idea because everybody told me they didn't want any more Yankees down there. But those Yankees spend a lot of money, and they're really important to what we need to be able to do. So we took over a space in Grand Central Station. In Grand Central Station, every year they have a squash tournament, actually in Grand Central Station, with an indoor court, and they set it up, and there's thousands of people walking by and doing all that. So we hijacked a space in Grand Central Station, and we had videos, and we had people there for a week just talking about Sea Island. And you have all walks of life that are kind of going through Grand Central Station. A lot of people didn't know Georgia had a coast, which is, I think, a familiar refrain that people hear. People didn't really understand what we were trying to do. Our videos were loud and annoying, and we were constantly being threatened by the Port Authority police. But what it did was it created some awareness, and that awareness turned into a little bit more trial, and that trial then turns into loyalty, and that was kind of how we wanted to do that. With our guests, we had a lot of guests that really understood or thought about the cloister before it was even torn down and rebuilt. And they had all these fond memories. So, but there was a point in time where the messaging, unintentional messaging, maybe intentional but unintentional, was if you had to ask for the price, you probably couldn't afford to come and stay there. And our market isn't a flashy market. Our customer base and guest base is highly affluent. They just don't talk about it. So they could afford the room rate, but they didn't like the message. And a lot of them hadn't come back. So I wrote a personal letter to all of those guests, inviting them back to try, kind of rekindle, focusing on that memory again, what made Sea Island special, because our promise was that was going to be what you were going to get when you came back. And slowly but surely, it started to work. I think one of the things that's helped us is we have invested significant capital back into the company, both in terms of reinvestment and growth, adding facilities, expanding, and doing a number of other things. I was trying to think about the number this morning. It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million in the 13 years I've been there, back into the company, and that's really driven mostly by Mr. Anschutz, who was our owner at this point in time. And that capital investment was not just in kind of front-facing spaces, because you don't really engender loyalty with your team if you've got 5-star facilities in the front and not very good ones in the back. So we've tried to balance our investment on both sides in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, how we can facilitate providing a better experience, and then what that experience was. So in 2016, when Phil Anschutz bought his partners out, he did something really unique. And he put the company into a 100-year trust for the benefit of generations of his family. He is, by all accounts, one of the most successful businessmen around. I don't think he has to worry about, where his next car payment is going to be, or, what other financial obligation he's got. He's done just fine. And what he's realized is that there are certain assets that he owns, and he did this with our sister property in Colorado Springs, the Broadmoor, that he wants to be owned forever, part of his family's legacy, where he hopes that generations of his family can come back and gather and be part of it, and think about that and be fortunate and share that experience with those folks that are there. It's a really unique trait, and that doesn't really happen in our industry very often. There are very few kind of high net worth families that own iconic properties or resorts in the country that do that. We had kind of 3 significant growth phases in terms of what we were doing. So when I got there 13 years ago, we were emerging from bankruptcy, trying to find our way, build our credibility, build this guest kind of base back, convince our members that everything was going to be okay, indoctrinate the Yankee to become more Southern. All of those things that we needed to do to kind of get going, we did. So we had the first phase of growth for us was really kind of in the first 3 years or so, where we needed to try to emerge from a business that wasn't profitable and turn it onto a path of profitability and revenue growth and driving it that way. And our philosophy was really more about growing revenue as opposed to cutting expenses or managing it that way. The company had already cut to the bone to try to figure out how to survive. we were actually building back up and adding expense to what we were trying to do, because we needed that if we were going to grow along the goals that we set for ourselves. So we had a growth period. One was kind of a 3-year or so growth period, 3 or 4 year growth period. Then I finally convinced the 4 owners to do an expansion, and we added 63 rooms to the Cloister, and we added some more meeting space to the Cloister because we needed to be a bigger player in the group market to attract groups and be able to handle more than one group at a time and become a more regular player, because it helps to balance out our business between social and group. We expanded the Cloister in 2016, same time Phil bought his partners out, and we saw a pretty significant run up in that kind of 2016 to 2019 and 20 time frame. That was our kind of second phase of growth. And then the third phase came kind of during COVID and post-COVID. The idea of what it was like. I mean, COVID was awful. We closed the resort for 3 months. Thankfully, Governor Kemp created a platform which many businesses could operate in a safe manner and figure out how we wanted to do things. And I had a lot of conversations with them about how we do it and what we do. We brought some of the folks from their administration down to look at what we were doing. We brought other resorts in to look at what we were doing, because in Georgia we were one of the first to reopen through COVID, and we were one of the first resorts to come back. So we closed for 3 months. Before we did that, I had to furlough 1,450 people. It was the worst day of my professional career. I can't imagine another day that would be worse than that. But when we reopened, it was like a rocket ship. Everybody, amazingly, wanted to get out of wherever they were and come to Sea Island and frolic around and do all of those things and flaunt the rules and not wear masks or not be distant or not do whatever the rules we were setting up to do, to come and enjoy and feel that freedom again. And we opened, the first weekend we opened at like 90+%. That was dumb, by the way. We weren't ready for that. We didn't really plan that. It just happened. But that set off kind of a new phase of growth for us, and our growth went up significantly as a result of that. I think, one, through how we were able to manage early on. 2, people rediscovered Sea Island. Our year, it would have been kind of in that, from the summer of 2020 through the summer of 2021, in that 12-month period, we had more new guests from Atlanta than we had ever had. And, we think we're okay at marketing, and we have a sense of what our awareness level is. And it was an amazing number of people from Atlanta who had never heard of Sea Island. And it just, on the one hand, it's really exciting to get a bunch of new guests. On the other hand, you say to yourself, what the hell are you doing? This is your backyard. This is your biggest market, and people don't know who you are. But it turns out, as all of you know, there are a lot of transplants that come to Atlanta, a lot of people that move to Atlanta for the first time that didn't really know about Sea Island. So that gave us a lot of juice, and that kind of helped us kind of move through that part of the process. And now we're kind of at a point where, outside of significant changes, we've done expansions of our restaurants. We've completely added and redeveloped areas around the lodge. We completely redid one of our golf courses at Plantation. We've just done something at our private club at Ocean Forest, and we've done a lot of other big projects. We're kind of finishing all of our big projects this year. My last big project is we're building about a plus or minus $40 million housing project for team members, because we hire a lot of international team members during the season and during the year, and we don't have any place to put them. So we own a hotel on St. Simon's that we can fit almost 200 people in. We're building a new a new facility. It's kind of akin to the student housing model, the off-campus student housing model, where we've got 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and a kitchen and living room space. And that'll be 319 beds. So we'll have 500 plus beds that we can then control our own destiny on, all on St. Simon's, and take out all of our logistical issues of transportation and this, that, and the other, and position us for the future. So my new task now is kind of maintain and stabilize, and that's a different task in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. I've never met an owner who doesn't want to see growth, right? I've never had a boss who doesn't want us to continue to kind of push and challenge and do all of that. But to do that, you've got to be thinking about where you are, and our lens is a little bit different, because I never have any objective or goal or directive from our ownership to say, you got to boost our numbers in this particular year. We're not trying to sell the resort next year. We're not trying to position for anything else. We basically have very little to no debt on the company. Our ownership hates debt and is capable of not operating with debt. So we don't have lender pressure. We just have an owner that wants to see us sustain. And, part of our dialogue now is, what does that look like? What does a sustained level of durability in our income stream look like? How do we continue to drive revenue? How do we continue to maintain our level of profitability? How do we continue to execute at a high level? How do we continue to keep our membership happy? And how do we focus on what we need to do from that perspective? So that's kind of where we are from a business perspective. I want to talk for a minute about, I think one of the things that's really important to Sea Island Company, maybe more or less important to other companies, but something that I think is a real key to our success, both in the past and going forward in the future, and that's culture. I am a firm believer that culture drives everything in our business. I inherited an incredible culture. It was rocky because of financial situation, but the culture and the passion inside our team was something I'd never seen before. And I had the opportunity to see hundreds and hundreds of resort operations. Never came across a team as passionate and committed as this team. But when we came out of COVID and we were chasing our tail, and of those 1,450 people we'd furloughed, we tried to hire everybody back, and we lost 150 right away. And we were losing more people than we were gaining. So we were trying to operate at a really high level with a really low level of staffing and team. And, I like to tell people that I wake up every morning and I think to myself, don't screw this up. Right? This is what you're in charge of. Just don't screw this up. And one morning during COVID, I woke up and I thought, we're screwing it up. And I came in and I talked to my senior team about it, and they said, yeah, we're screwing it up. So we had an all-company meeting, and what I shared with our team was that I was nervous about our culture. And when I talked to them about it, I said, our culture is a little bit like a garden. Right? If you spend all of your time on this side of the garden, tending to it, giving it care, all of the love it takes, it's going to look pretty good. If you spend no time on this side, you can't expect it to look like that. It's going to look bad. And what I said was that we were spending all of our time doing everything in our power to take care of our guests and our members with insufficient regard for our team. And that was a hard thing to stand up in front of your whole company to say, but it was the truth. We weren't spending enough time on our team. So we had kind of recommitted our purpose which is really to enrich lives. That's our company's purpose. But we talked about putting our team members first in everything that we do. And it's not a novel, brand new concept. Many of you in the audience, I'm not a rocket scientist. I went to Michigan State, for crying out loud. I don't have that good of ideas. But it was It's a simple concept that if you take care of your team, they're going to take care of our guests and our members and our community. And in turn, our community and our members and our guests are going to help us take care of our team. So the trick isn't about coming up with the idea. The trick is executing the idea. And we created 8 objectives that we call our Great 8 that were focused on putting our team members first. And we did this a couple years ago, and we've seen really significant results. So that's why when I talk about investing in the back, that's important. Because whenever you're having a discussion with an owner or whatever else, and they say, well, we could do this capital investment that we know are going to have an impact on our guests and members because it's going to be visible, or we can do this capital investment in what we call the back of the house that's not visible, but really important and more necessary than this one. What do we choose? So previously we chose this one. Today we choose this one. Only because, and we're just creating more balance, right? It's not one or the other, but it's more balance in terms of what we're doing from a capital perspective. What does that do? Well, that reinforces the messaging to our team that we're in this with you and that we're doing everything we can, creating a space where you can operate the way we want you to operate. Our team is unbelievable. Those of you who've had a chance to go down and experience it, it's from the heart. That's what I love about it. They're unscripted. We don't train them to say, it's my pleasure. And it's not a knock on that because that works for some companies. We don't train them to say something specific. We train them to be themselves. We want them to be warm and passionate and authentic. And if that means they call you Bubba, then they call you Bubba. Or if they call you Sugar, or they call you Honey, or they do whatever, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'd rather have a discussion with our team about becoming a little more too comfortable with our guests and members than to say, stop being so rigid, right? That is an easier thing for us, an easier conversation for us to have as it relates to what we're trying to do. The other thing we've kind of done is that we are, Sea Island Company has an extraordinary history of being an incredible steward to the community. All of the land that was owned on St. Simon's, all the schools and churches, and just about every school and church on St. Simon's is on land that was donated by the company. The company has always been and continues to be a steward of our environment, a steward of our community, and a big supporter. We're the largest private employer in our community. We employ over 2,000 people. But we never really did a great job of talking about it. And what we learned in this kind of COVID time frame, and as we were going through this Grade 8 process, is people want to know they work for a company that's doing good, that means something. They want to feel like they belong to something. We talk about belonging to our Sea Island family. Part of that is going out in the community and volunteering and doing things. And we're in the midst of we've just launched a new initiative to address housing insecurity in our community. And the Anschutz Foundation, who's been very generous to help do that, we got to put $5 million up against a $10 million goal as a challenge in our community to go out and create housing for people that are on their way to chronic homelessness. It's more a circumstantial problem. And we kind of got into this because we see and have hired guys from one particular area, this place called Saved by Grace, where you had guys that ended up homeless because of difficult circumstances, maybe some bad decisions, but some other things that they couldn't control that kind of spiraled and all of a sudden were there. They worked for us. They got a second opportunity to work for us. This program is about getting people back on the way toward where they need to be, and they're phenomenal. And not only have our team members rallied around them, but our members and guests have rallied around them. and it's created an opportunity for us to think about what we do. So we've got an initiative that helps that. We have no place in our community that is a place for women and children to be. We've got places for children to be, smaller places for women to be. But if you are, if you are a woman on the verge of homelessness with kids, the only way you can kind of get out of it is by separating, and we don't think that's a good idea. So part of this initiative will be building new housing for them. And that's just kind of one of many community initiatives that we're very focused on, that our team believes in, that we believe in, that we think has really helped us with what we need to do. Now, all of this work on our team, our purpose, these initiatives, we just really have two goals from that. First goal is retention. We want to hold on to the very best people that we can hold on to, because it's a lot easier to hold on to people than it is to try to hire people, train people, get them going and get up to speed. If you can hold on to people and you can save on all of the lost productivity and you continue the consistency, that's really important. And the second part is just a great service experience. And those two go hand in hand. If we have longer tenured folks, we don't have much turnover, we're going to be able to deliver that service experience that everybody expects more consistently, more frequently, and with more of a wow. So we'll create an opportunity for our teams to really enrich lives. That's what our goal is. So let me just close with a couple of thoughts on, lessons I've learned and things about leadership style and the like, because we have some young people in the audience who might be thinking about what they're doing and how their career works and things to be thinking about. I'll just share some things that I've learned over the years. One is I'm really big on what your leadership style is, because I think it's really important. Our industry is not necessarily well regarded in large part about leadership style, right? There are no less than, 20 or 30 cooking shows on there where you got chefs screaming at people and this and that and the other thing, and banging on plates and doing all of that and trying to get results. That was, and to some degree still remains, the world of food and beverage and culinary, right? Maybe that works for them, but I think that's a terrible way to manage. And I'm trying to shift our leaders to be thinking about it a little bit differently. My style is about kind of collaboration, inspiration, motivation, and most importantly, being relational. Right? That's really what I want all of our leaders to do, is to be able to relate to everybody they're leading. That means getting to know people. That means taking the time to talk with them. That means trying to understand kind of what's going on in their world, because everybody has, Sea Island's not always about smiley face emojis and unicorns and stars and all the other stuff. Sometimes there are brown emoji days, you know that? Right? There's some days where people are having a brown emoji day, and it's not necessarily because of something that happened at work. It might be something that happened at home. It might be something that's going on in the community, or something that's going on in the news today that's really impacting them. And that impacts what they're doing. And if as a leader you don't know that someone's having one of those brown emoji days, you're going to miss an opportunity to help turn them around. I think it's really important for everybody to be able to engage at every level. So for me, I spend a lot of my time wandering around through our operation and with our team on the ground, doing whatever they're doing whatever they ask me to do, helping them on times when we're busy, because I want them to understand one simple thing, and that is there isn't a single job that they do in this company that I won't do with them, or that they ask me to do something or not do something. Early on when it was probably maybe in my second year or so at Sea Island, and I think it was a 4th of July holiday. It was a busy holiday at the beach. And at the end of the day, especially back then, because there was a ton of work to do to get everything cleaned up and get ready for the next day. And our team that works on the beach, they work their tails off, and it's hot, and you got sand all over you. It's a mess. You people are messy. Like, you don't throw stuff away. You just leave it. You walk around. You do all of that stuff. You think, oh, we're going to get it. Well, the we're going to get it was me, right? So, we're walking, and I was helping the guys clean up, do chairs and do trash and trays and all that stuff that all of you left on the beach. And I came to this trash can, right? And I was, my job then was just swapping out, bags and taking the trash. So I walked up to the trash can, and I looked in, and there wasn't a bag. The bag was at the bottom, right? And the trash was overflowing. And it was just disgusting, like ice cream right on the top. It was just a mess getting into it. And I'd like to say I dove right into it, and I tried to do that, but I really, really did look around and try to think to myself, well, maybe I'll just go to the next can, or isn't somebody calling me, or do I have to do this? And I thought, you know what? If I don't do it, someone else is going to have to do it, and it's going to be disgusting, so I might as well do it. So I'm there like shoulder deep, pulling garbage out and trying to put it into another bag and reaching down for the bag that was at the bottom but useless at that point in time. And I finally got all that cleaned up. I didn't realize, but there were probably 4 or 5 of my team members and another half a dozen or so members who were just kind of watching this. So they must have seen me, doing this and looking around and saying, well, what's he going to do? And a number of them came up to me afterwards and said, I don't know anybody that's ever done that. And to me, that was just kind of, I don't know. I mean, that's what we're supposed to, someone has to do it. I was there. I said I would do that, so that's what I did. But that helps to define how you can relate to your team and what you do. So I think the lesson in that is don't go looking for the bad garbage can, because it really is disgusting. But look for opportunities where you can work alongside your team members, and when you can demonstrate what you need to do and how you need to do that from that perspective. I talked about trust. There are 2 other things, I guess. One is, when I talk about relational leadership and being relatable, sometimes I've got younger leaders who ask me, well, how do I hold my team accountable if you want me to be nice to them, or if you want me to talk to them and see how they're doing? Well, relational leadership doesn't abdicate accountability. In fact, I think it enhances it, because it is so much easier to have a conversation with somebody on your team that might have missed the mark somewhere, or you want to see do a little bit more, if you have that relationship with them. Because then they understand you're coming to them, from a position of engagement, trust, and care and compassion, right? You want to see them succeed. Here's a way that I think you can be better at succeeding. Not, hey, you did this wrong, and I might or might not remember your name or whatever, to be able to do something like that. So I think that's a really important point. And then I think one of the things that is important for all leaders to be able to do is to kind of admit when you're wrong, right? Admit fault. When something doesn't work or something doesn't go very well, you just need to say, well, that just didn't work, and I was wrong. It comes easy for me because my wife tells me I'm wrong a lot. My kids tell me I'm wrong a lot. So I'm kind of used to it. But I think that's a really important point. And, part of that relational piece is to be a little bit vulnerable with your team or with your colleagues. Because vulnerability isn't something we should be fearing. It should be something we should kind of lean into. because it humanizes you as an individual and helps people understand how to work with you. Whether you're a leader or you're being led by somebody, if you show that you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable with somebody, even a boss, what it signals to the boss is that you're all in. You're really in, and you're a part of this, and that's what helps and really kind of makes it better. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to answer questions. I hope this is, in some way, I love telling the story. I could be up here talking for hours about this place and what we do and the challenges we face. But I love this forum. I love what this do. Michigan State doesn't do this either. I'm on the board of our hospitality school. We don't do enough of this type of alumni engagement, and I think it's a really important point. So I'm here to answer any questions you have. Thanks very much for listening to me. Yes, sir.
What was the most impactful back-of-house investment?
So, most impactful back-of-house investment. I think we're doing it right now. One is, and it's the cafeteria. So, on Sea Island and at the lodge, and we did the lodge cafeteria first, and that made a big deal. And we're working on our Sea Island cafeteria. But people don't realize that the cafeteria is one of the most central places where everybody is there, and you can see just about everybody. Now, maybe many of you work in this audience work remotely, and you don't have a cafeteria, which is a shame, because the idea of being remote all the time is really bothersome to me. The great thing about Sea Island is you can't be a remote bartender. You can't be a remote server. You can't be, a remote front desk agent. So the cafeteria is going to be the most impactful, and we're investing significantly in turning that around and creating a better environment for that. I think that's going to end up being our most impactful.
So I'm curious about your boss. You've got a board of one, an owner of one, and I guess his family. I'm sure you send financial reports. How often does he call you, or do you call him? How do you report it, and how does he know that you're doing a good job?
I don't know the last one. So it's really interesting. Philip Anschutz is a remarkable guy. He has a ton of businesses, but he loves Sea Island, and he understands all of his businesses. He is a unique old school guy. Never used a computer before in his life. Never been on the internet. Doesn't really, kind of knows what the internet is, but doesn't want to know about it, right? Has just been using a cell phone, for probably the last 3 or 4 years, and recently learned to take pictures with it. So he works out of his briefcase with paper, and he gets a FedEx every day, sends a FedEx every day, dictates memos. People in this audience are like, I don't know what he's talking about. But he is unique in that way. He knows our business. So when he comes to see me, he asks me specifically about how we're doing in a particular area, maybe one of our restaurants or whatever else. And he knows the numbers. And he wants to know if I know the numbers. And I will tell you, there are times when he knows the numbers better than I know the numbers, and it's kind of embarrassing. But he has a very flat organization. He's not much for levels, so even though I report to somebody before I get to Phil, he just calls me, or comes to see me. And he spends a lot of time at Sea Island, so we are together a lot. And that's kind of how he likes to manage his businesses, by being a part of them and seeing them and kind of feeling them. And then he talks to everybody. Like if he's on property and you're there, he'll be in the lobby talking to our guests, to members. He gets up really early in the morning, like 3:30 in the morning, and he's wandering around, and he would work at our concierge desk in the morning and go get coffee or whatever else for the agents up front. So wander around the whole hotel. He probably knows the hotel better than I do because he knows he just wanders and does all of that. But that's kind of his style and what he does.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So first, for my question, Scott, I want to thank you because you do show great leadership around Sea Island. So you guys, the story about the trash, I'm sure it's true. Because I've seen Scott run trays during 4th of July and lots of things. So I think that is a great example of leadership. And as I think about my career and who I want to be as a leader, I want to echo that as well. So thank you for that. My question comes from being a member. I'm not a plant, but being a member of Sea Island, I recognize how difficult it is to manage the members who probably have some needs and wants. Then you have the hotel guests. The hotel guests are divided up into, I would think, like 2 distinct groups. So families who want to enjoy vacation and then corporate guests. How do you think about the hierarchy of how you manage all of those needs because they're all looking for very different experiences?
That's a great question. So the question is, how do we manage kind of 3 constituencies, right? 2 constituencies on our guest side, which are our groups, and then our kind of social families who come down there on vacation. And then the 3rd constituency is our membership. So at Sea Island, we do not have any preferred reservations or block tea times or anything else for members or for guests. Like, we don't. We just manage kind of the volume either way. Sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't work so well. Inevitably, and we do a member survey every year, and I have an annual member meeting, and every year in the member survey, the number 1 response is, we need priority over the guests, right? And when we get our guest satisfaction surveys, one of the key themes is we need priority over the members, right? So this notion of what we're doing is always about how we're balancing and what we're trying to do. So as an example with our members, we're trying more and more to kind of learn their movements and what their patterns are. And then we're also trying to kind of manage their patterns a little bit more. So it doesn't matter how affluent you are. Everybody loves a deal. Okay? Everybody loves a deal. We created things like Monday nights used to be our slowest night at the restaurants, and so we created a Member Monday where our members get double their normal discount on food and beverage. So they flood the restaurants on Monday. We've created kind of a member happy hour and a dining policy where if you get in before 6 o'clock, we'll double your discount. Because then we can get a lot of members in early, and the next seating can be guests or other members. But we've got 2,100 active member families. So I can't feed every single one of those families plus the resort guests at night to begin with. So we're always trying to balance what we're trying to do. From time to time, we consider what we're going to do in terms of should we block some things for members and guests. And we may ultimately do that because we're just constantly reevaluating. The second part of the question is even more interesting in the sense that our members hate name badges, right? They hate corporate groups that come and are kind of circulating and hanging out and clogging up areas or whatever else. What we've tried to educate the members about are a couple of things. One was that when we have a lot of groups in-house, we can manage their movements pretty easily. So we know that at night they're going to be in one of our meeting spaces for a banquet event, which leaves the restaurants open for the members and our resort guests and our social guests to dine in. So we continue to kind of communicate to our membership what those opportunities are and how we do that. But it's a constant battle. Early on, in my first or second annual member meeting, I said that one of my goals was to grow our resort business. And one of the members raised their hand and asked the question, said, well, why do you want to do that? We don't like that idea. I said, well, think of it this way. There are 2 levers that I can pull to drive revenue. One, I can try to drive our resort business and create more revenue that way, or I can significantly raise your dues.
The first one's better.
Yeah, the first one was better, and I got a lot of cheerleaders until, now we're much busier than we were back then when I was making that statement. So now it really is a question of how are we balancing through that, and it's kind of like playing a little three-dimensional chess to be able to figure out how you do that. Yes, sir.
Scott, thanks for coming in this morning and sharing about your business. Been enjoying hearing your talk. And my question is, what circumstances led you up to the conclusion that your staff needed a reboot on culture and needed some reinvestment? Like, what made you crystallize that insight?
Well, I think for the most part, the question was, what was the trigger that made us think we needed to do a bit of a kind of a cultural reboot? As we were coming out of COVID and growing and doing all of this, we were constantly short-staffed. And, at one point in time, we had almost 350 to 400 open positions. And we were still trying to execute and operate at the highest level. And we were putting tremendous pressure on our team to be able to do that. What we were also noticing is that we would hire people, but, we weren't taking the time because we didn't have the time. We weren't taking the time to give them an appropriate level of training and understanding of what they're going to get into. We were just kind of throwing people into the fire. And amazingly, they quit, right? Because they realized this is not what I signed up for. I thought it was going to be a little bit different, and nobody's helping me. So that was really what was driving us. At one point in time, we were actually, we lost more people than we hired. So we kept going down on a net basis, and we just said to ourselves, this is not sustainable. We can't continue to operate like we're operating that way. And yes, in one particular year, because we were so short-staffed, our margins were much better, but it was kind of an artificial margin, right? It was an artificial, unsustainable margin. And part of our job was to convince our ownership as to the why, right? In our industry, and the hospitality industry has not been very good at being a great industry for people to go into, because it's an industry that's kind of based on this notion of long hours, lower wages, and to move up, you got to move around. That's a tough thing to do, to ask people to do, to be a part of. So we're having to kind of rethink what the industry does, how we do that. We made lots of significant changes in compensation and the way that we compensate our team. We are really focused on what the growth opportunities are, what the career path is for our team members, not getting stuck in one particular discipline or department or area. So that's really what we're trying to do. But I think the big trigger for us was we just couldn't get enough people going, and we knew the answer. We just didn't want to accept the answer. That's what was happening. One more question. In the back?
So a few Thursdays ago, I was a guest of someone who lives on the island, and we were coming home from dinner, and it was stormy, and a tree had fallen across the road. And as we were leaving, Scott had a hard hat on with a chainsaw, was helping move the tree, and created a path for people to get home. It was like 10:30 at night, so I mean, your leadership style was extremely evident at that point. But that was the night that the hurricane came through, and the next day, I mean, I can't imagine the challenges you went through. There were trees everywhere. There was no power at the cloister. So your team made it go away within, it seemed like, a blink of an eye. But can you talk about the challenge that presented and how proud you must have been of your team?
Yeah. So, thank you. The storms kind of throw different things at you, right? In when I got there, people said, we never have hurricanes down there. We never have any storms. We haven't had a storm in 100 years. So I really blame Mr. Anschutz. When he bought the partners out, that's really when we started having storm issues. He knows that, and we laugh about it. But every storm provides different challenges in terms of what we're doing. Some of the storms we've had to evacuate for, right? To be honest, that's an easier, more simple plan than having to shelter in place and deal with whatever is happening. And we learn, in Helene, I think generally speaking, we underestimated the impact. And our community, frankly, underestimated that impact. We didn't realize it was going to be as strong as it was. And, compared to everywhere else in the state of Georgia, we were extraordinarily fortunate. Ours was a wind-driven event, and we lost a lot of trees, and we had to deal with that. But cutting trees is a lot easier than what other folks had to deal with. We had team members who had, who couldn't come to work or, had no power, had lost, trees on houses or trees in front of that. So, our job during these storms is to try to get everything back to normal as much as we possibly can right away. We've got crews we stage on both sides of, either coming on Sea Island or off of Sea Island. We work closely with our county. We become basically the public works department for the county because the county can't get to all the areas on the island. So we're cutting trees on all of the primary roads on St. Simon's so that people can move around and our team can get to work. And the county works, the public works folks can do the same. That's kind of the benefit of private resources and being able to be a little bit more proactive in terms of what you're doing. But I think the most remarkable thing that happens during these storms is what our team members are willing to give up to come to work and provide service. Many of those folks, after Helene, were leaving their house without power and no idea what was going on, driving around through yards or whatever to get around fallen trees and that to get to where we were. And we had a big tree came across the causeway that prevented anybody from getting on Sea Island for a few hours. We finally cleared it about 9:30 in the morning. We had lost power because it had hit the power line. But we had hundreds of people lined up ready to come into work that were ready. And every single one of the ones that I talked to said, yeah, I don't have power. I don't know what's going on at my house. When I left, there was a big, huge tree on my roof. I'll deal with that later. That is remarkable because it's very easy, and it would have been fine if they would have called and just said, you know what, I can't get there because I've got this issue. But that level of commitment just kind of fuels us and drives us and keeps us going from that perspective. So thank you.
Scott, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story from trash cans to chainsaws. We really appreciate it. And on behalf of Terry, we'd like to present you with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.